like with all these levels, you know, what is the most common injury? You know, going into like kind of the meat and potatoes of our conversation of our show here. What would you say is the most common sports injuries that you work with personally and that you see?
The two most common, I have to give you two. If we're looking for sort of acute injuries, the things that happen quickly and need immediate treatment, when you're dealing with basketball, it's definitely ankle sprains are the things that you see show up all the time. But probably on a more ongoing basis, especially with this age group and population, it's knee pain. You get that an awful lot. And
would you say that's puberty? And just
it's a little, yeah, that has a big thing to do with it. A lot of these kids at different levels are playing high volume. The surface they're playing on, there's a lot of things that go into causing those kinds of pains and injuries. But it is a little bit higher in this population, I would say. And then I guess you'd have to also talk a little bit, we don't really think about it as much, but concussion, not so much treatment, but certainly protocols and following that through that is a mainstay too of treatment. You're never really without following at least one person that's been gone through that. And some of those things resolve very quickly and others last, unfortunately, a little bit longer. So
function from the brain to, you know, it was just delayed from telling your muscles to trigger at the right time, for the right cut, for the right landing, for the right jump? Or is it more of a weakness in the muscles and weakness in the joints?
If we're looking at traumatic injuries like an ankle sprain, sometimes they just happen. It's just biomechanics. If you come down and your foot hits somebody on a certain angle, another foot, and gravity is what it is, and physics, and you're going to go over and you're going to cause damage. Although then you get into the fact that down the road, that same individual who had an ankle sprain potentially didn't give it enough time or didn't rehab it enough. And then, yes, that kind of thing. As you get tired in a game, there are different factors that are taking your energy from you, whether that's, your aerobic capacity, the heat of the environment, trying to keep your system cool. There's only so much that your body can deal with at one point, and eventually fatigue will set in. And if you're not too resilient with some of that tissue, or like you said, the proprioception, having that neural drive, you can get a little sluggish, and if timing's off, then yeah, somebody can make a cut, go to turn one direction, and the ankle just doesn't respond as fast, and it's all it takes sometimes is a little tweak on it. There's plenty of research that if you do training, neuromuscular training, you can make yourself a little more resilient to stopping some of those or delaying that point of fatigue where you can't recover from something. Maintaining, as you said, mobility or flexibility, and flexibility in soft tissue to allow you to have the range to let you get the motion that you need.
Because we have been talking more about now mobility and flexibility. Is there a such thing as being too flexible or too mobile?
So flexibility would likely refer to the length of a given tissue or a muscle. Okay, so its ability to change length. Mobility is a more general term. I mean, flexibility is a portion of mobility, but mobility per se is more about the range of motion that a joint has, and there are many factors that come into play with that. So yes, you can be too mobile, you can be too flexible. We don't often see that. We see usually the opposite. But if somebody is, let's say, doing certain activities or stretching really, or maybe not so much stretching, maybe they've had an injury and it's created a bit of a stretch in tissue, and then they've been working really hard at keeping their ankle mobility. So maybe they've got a little lengthened their gastroc muscle or the calf muscle. That wouldn't necessarily set them up for more injury, but it's more a factor of, have you got strength in the muscle and the range that you have? So you can be really mobile, but if you have good strength throughout that whole range of motion, meaning that, when your ankle's all the way bent up here, you can still push off of it versus just having power in that mid-range, then you're fine. But it's where when you don't train those end ranges, that's for people that have increased movement or mobility issues, the strengthening component is that much more.
How connected is the human body? And from your studies and your research, like, is there a way where you can focus on one injury and rehab that completely without necessarily having to focus on strengthening the rest of your body to meet the needs of that injury?
Uh, Rarely. I mean, if there's a short-term injury and they go through inflammatory process and get back on the court very quickly, then they don't lose a lot. But the longer an injury goes on, like you said, the more compensation that you develop, the more you tend to put your other load under more duress, or if you say you rolled your right ankle, then you're on your left leg a lot more. So maybe you start to fatigue that. Maybe you get shortness in your hip flexor on that side and not the other one. And so you're right, down the road, what'll happen is maybe the uninjured leg just took too much of a beating.
At home, what are some, non-equipment related exercises or things these young athletes could be doing to help stay sharp for when they do get back to competition?
Well, it depends when competition starts, but the fastest thing that's going to probably go with them is the conditioning, unless they're trying to maintain that. So I would say that the things that they're going to have to do are, and if they haven't already, they definitely need to start it now, is sit down and you got to get a routine together. It's all about routine. You can't wake up in the day and say, I might do this today or try this. It should be written down or programmed somewhere so that you don't have to think about it. Just, take a day and just write out a plan. And then from there, just act on it. And then it's just automatic. And I'd say that's the biggest thing with this is consistency. It's just trying to get at it, maintaining and do the same thing. So with that in mind, somebody who's at home right now, they have we even promoted this a little bit, saying the word opportunity with this, because as bad as COVID is and what it's done for our life and other people's lives, it provides students, especially, they have a little more time that's available. Now, how you schedule that and fill your time is up to you, but as an athlete, you certainly have the ability to break your day up into several different pieces. You don't have to cram everything all in after school now into 2 hours and then get your homework done or whatever. You could wake up and you could say, you know what, I'm going to do a little cardio component first. I'm going to go for a run, get on a bike, something like that, and get your 20 minutes of cardio in. You can do some high intensity training where you do some sprints someday, and other days where you're just doing general conditioning. So there's that factor to it. I think for sure there should be a component of strength training, especially, it depends what population we're talking about. But if we're talking about high school level, they're into that age group where they're starting to have to condition their body and try to put a little bit of weight on, or certainly strength anyways. And so there's a component of that should be done. And because this is the new part, because you're not going out to school anymore, there's a lot of sedentary activity. There's a lot of laying around, there's a lot of sitting, and that sets you up to have certain stiffness that you might not have had. For sure, we're doing all these virtual consults now. You're sitting in a chair talking to somebody, hip flexors are as short as they've ever been. So get out, move. And so with that in mind, I think a stretching a portion of your day is also pretty important.
Sadly, I think we both know it's going to be inevitable, but there's going to be a spike in injuries probably around the first couple of months or so when competitions start up again.
Yep.
Do you have an idea or an opinion of what would be the most common injury you see or the sports world will see when competition starts up again?
Well, the one thing that this quarantine has imposed on everybody is the inability to get out and compete and play against each other. So even if you're pretty religious about doing your exercises each day, there's going to be a level of jumping and bounding that you just can't get that in-game thing. So likely what's going to happen is I'm not so worried about those traumatic injuries. It's the overuse stuff. I think people will get back, and I think we'll find, a month down the road, might take up to 2 months before they start really complaining about it. But if they haven't been doing a lot of those movements, like knees are going to show up. People are going to start getting achy knees. Initially, it was good because everybody got a couple of weeks to shut it down, and that was good for the body. But if you didn't pick anything up at that point and you just kind of wrote it out, when you go back, if everyone tries to cram a bunch of a season or a compressed season together, there's going to be a lot of volume, and that's certainly a recipe for injuries.
All right, so 11 questions, quick speed
11.
round. 11. We got 11. So a quick one-word answer, maybe a sentence or two. Here we go. You ready? All right. So, ice or hot? What type of baths or showers should athletes be doing after games and intense workouts?
I got to go with ice. Yeah.
Dynamic versus static stretching. What are you going with for the longevity of an athlete?
Dynamic.
When it comes to multi-sport athletes, what is it about them that makes their body so resilient to, being injury prone? Or yeah,
less injury prone.
Less injury prone. Sorry,
less injury prone. Yeah, it's the different requirements of those sports.
What is your favorite piece of equipment when using when you're rehabbing athletes? You have a favorite piece of equipment?
Well, let's see. We do a lot with at our clinic. If you come into our clinic, you're not going to see a whole lot of machines or gadgets. A lot of what we just use are bands and body weight, and really with a lot of careful attention to that, I'd say you really don't need equipment, but I'm going to go with bands if we have to do something.
I know that firsthand. I remember you're working on my shoulder. It was freaky what you told me about mine with the winging, and like my shoulder blade was going up. So do you have any guilty pleasures during quarantine, like a certain snack or Netflix series?
Last Dance.
That's not a guilty pleasure. Everybody's on that.
Well, that's the only thing I look forward to at the end of each week is that next edition.
Hey,
and as soon as I hang up with you, I'm watching the sixth one. I watched the fifth this afternoon, but I'm holding on to that other one for tonight.
All right. So for the guys and girls like me that wish to age like you and Vicky, what is one piece of advice you would give us?
Just stay active. Stay active. That's it.
Okay. Final words. Let us know where we can find you, what you're up to, anything you might have coming up, Instagram tags, emails to reach you at. This is your kind of 30 seconds to self-promote yourself here in Avenue.
Well, obviously you can find me here. You got me here right now. But other than that, I'm not a big social media guy, so you're not going to find me a whole lot on there. But the clinic itself, we're on. So you can look us up on Instagram, Facebook. I think we even got a Twitter account. We don't use it too much, but yeah. And then the clinic itself is very accessible. A lot of people want to. The most common question we get is, do I need a referral to get in there? And for the most part, the referral thing is only if you're trying to get money reimbursed from your insurance company. And most people that have a plan find that they don't need referrals any longer, as long as you're a registered physiotherapist. And everybody that works at our clinic is registered, and everybody at our clinic has attained a very high level of education. So everybody that works there is a viable option for anybody who's hurt. So you just give the clinic a call. Right now, if you call the clinic, you'll get right to our receptionist, and we're booking people online every day. And when we're back up and running, we'll see them in clinic. But I'm sure that the virtual thing will continue for probably indefinitely for some component, because it reaches people that they can't necessarily get in all the time or from a longer distance away. So that's going to be kind of an interesting thing. I think there's a role for that in the future as well.
Yeah, no, it looks like you're adapting and adjusting to the times for sure. And I'm excited to see where this all, what this all can bring to you in the future, and having you. Obviously, there's always going to be a need for you guys, right? Given physiotherapy, especially after quarantine, right? So you guys are an essential service, really, especially for athletes. So on behalf of myself and all the athletes that you get to work with, thank you for your time and for your services, and everybody that gets to watch.